They called her baby girl, the voice of a new generation, smooth, effortless, untouchable. Aaliyah Dana Houghton had everything. By 22, she had conquered R&B, redefined style, and starred in Hollywood films. She was elegant where others were loud, mysterious where others were desperate for attention. And just as her star was rising beyond the horizon, it fell. On the 25th of August, 2001, Aaliyah boarded a small Cessna plane in the Bahamas. Minutes after takeoff, it exploded in midair. She was gone before the world even realized what it had lost. The headlines said, "Accident," but the story behind it was anything but simple. Aaliyah wasn't supposed to be on that plane. The pilot wasn't licensed to fly it. The aircraft was overloaded by hundreds of pounds. And the girl who had spent her life under control, her image, her sound, her mystery, had her final moments stolen by chaos. Fans mourned the angelic singer, whose voice still echoed with innocence, and the media called it a tragedy. But behind that word lay something deeper, the truth of an artist who was constantly shaped, controlled, and consumed by the very industry that claimed to love her. Everyone saw the perfection. No one saw the pressure. Aaliyah's light didn't fade. It was taken. And like all stars that fall too soon, she left a sky that has never looked the same since. Before she became the voice that defined a generation, Aaliyah Dana Houghton was just a shy girl from Brooklyn, raised in Detroit, a city built on soul and struggle. Born on the 16th of January 1979, she grew up in a family that believed in music the way others believe in prayer. Her mother, Diane, was a vocalist. Her uncle, Barry Hankerson, worked in the music business and was married to Gladys Knight, one of the queens of soul. It was through them that Aaliyah learned that music wasn't just something you sang, it was something you became. By the time she was 10, she was already performing on stage with Gladys Knight in Las Vegas. The crowd saw something rare, a poise beyond her years, a calm that seemed almost supernatural. She didn't shout, she didn't need to. Aaliyah's power came from subtlety, the kind of quiet confidence that made people lean in to listen. At 14, her uncle introduced her to a young, rising producer, R. Kelly. He was charismatic, talented, and dangerous. He produced her debut album, Age Ain't Nothing But a Number, a haunting title that, years later, would take on an entirely different meaning. The album was a success. Critics praised her voice, that smoky, effortless tone that made R&B sound futuristic. But behind the music, something darker was happening. In 1994, when Aaliyah was still only 15, reports surfaced that she had secretly married Kelly, who was 27. The marriage certificate listed her age as 18. Within months, the marriage was annulled. Both families denied it. Aaliyah never spoke of it again. And from that silence, her mystery was born. After breaking ties with Kelly, she rebuilt herself stronger, sharper, more in control. She began working with producers Timbaland and Missy Elliott, two innovators who recognized her talent not just as a singer, but as a visionary. Together, they reinvented R&B, blending soul with electronic beats, sensuality with elegance. Songs like One in a Million and Are You That Somebody weren't just hits, they were prophecies. Her voice didn't demand attention, it invited it. Smooth, haunting, futuristic. She made R&B feel like it belonged in the 21st century before the century even began. But Aaliyah wasn't just about music. She had a presence, that elusive mix of confidence and softness that made the world see her as both untouchable and deeply human. She dressed in baggy pants and sunglasses, spoke gently, smiled rarely. She was everything pop culture didn't understand, powerful without trying. By her early 20s, she was stepping into Hollywood. She starred in Romeo Must Die 2000 and was filming Queen of the Damned when tragedy struck. Critics saw her as the next global icon, a perfect blend of talent, beauty, and mystery. But behind the perfection, there was fatigue. Aaliyah's schedule was brutal, constant travel, photo shoots, rehearsals. She spoke often about needing rest, about wanting to retreat and find herself. She told one interviewer, "I want people to remember me for being a good person, for being real." Maybe she knew the sky was calling her too soon. Because just as her world was expanding beyond imagination, it collapsed in one final, blinding instant. By 2000, Aaliyah was no longer a rising star, she was the future. Her sound, that smooth blend of digital beats and soulful restraint, had redefined R&B. She wasn't just a singer, she was a brand of elegance. Her music whispered where others shouted, and somehow, that made her unforgettable. Her album One in a Million sold millions worldwide, and her collaboration with Timbaland and Missy Elliott shaped the blueprint for modern R&B. Every artist who followed Beyoncé, Rihanna, Ciara borrowed something from her. She wasn't loud. She didn't chase attention. But everything she did became a movement. And then came Hollywood. In 2000, Aaliyah made her acting debut in Romeo Must Die alongside Jet Li, showing that she could hold her own next to legends. She wasn't playing a role, she was radiating presence. The movie made her an international star, and producers rushed to cast her next. She signed on for the Matrix sequels and starred as the vampire queen Akasha in Queen of the Damned, a performance that critics later described as unearthly. It was eerie how fitting that word would become. In interviews, she spoke about wanting to rest, to find love, to slow down, but her schedule only grew heavier. Her third album, Aaliyah, released in July 2001, was her boldest yet confident, experimental, spiritual. It felt like a goodbye disguised as a beginning. Then came Rock the Boat. The music video shoot took her and her crew to the Bahamas, under a golden Caribbean sun. The footage was stunning. Aaliyah, glowing against the waves, calm and radiant. But those who were there noticed something else. She looked tired. She'd been filming for days, barely sleeping, still smiling for every take. On the 25th of August, 2001, after wrapping early, the crew was ready to return to Miami. The small Cessna 402B they'd chartered sat on the runway. But when the pilot saw how much equipment they were carrying, he warned them the plane was overloaded. Still, the team wanted to leave. The sun was setting, and Aaliyah was eager to go home. Witnesses said she seemed quiet that day, almost withdrawn. One crew member later recalled that she said, "I don't feel comfortable getting on this plane," but someone assured her it would be fine. She boarded. Moments later, the engines screamed. The plane lifted, then tilted. And in a flash, it was over. It crashed 200 feet from the runway, bursting into flames. Aaliyah and 8 others were killed instantly. The pilot, later found to have traces of cocaine and alcohol in his system, wasn't licensed to fly that model of aircraft. The plane was over its weight limit by more than 700 pounds. A chain of reckless decisions, none of them hers, had taken her life. When news broke, disbelief echoed across the world. How could someone so young, so pure, so steady, just vanish? At 22, she had already achieved what most could only dream of. But in her quiet grace, there was always a fragility, a softness that the world mistook for safety. Her funeral in New York City drew thousands. White horses carried her coffin. Doves were released into the sky. It was beautiful and unbearable. The girl who had been called one in a million had lived up to her name and left too soon to ever be replaced. The world called it an accident. But like so many Hollywood tragedies, the closer you look, the more the cracks begin to show. In the aftermath of the crash, investigators found a story written not in fate, but in failure of greed, negligence, and a system that protected profits before people. The pilot, Luis Morales III, was not certified to fly the twin-engine Cessna that carried Aaliyah. He had lied on his application and tested positive for cocaine and alcohol after the crash. The plane was overloaded by nearly 700 pounds, and the balance was off. It should never have left the runway. But it did, because the industry was always in a hurry, always pushing, always chasing the next headline. And Aaliyah, calm, disciplined, trusting, got caught in the rush. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't naive. She was surrounded by professionals who were supposed to protect her, and they failed. Years later, witnesses revealed chilling details. Airport staff said they begged her team not to take off. One worker claimed that Aaliyah herself hesitated before boarding, saying she didn't want to fly on that plane. Another recalled that she was carried onto the aircraft, half asleep after taking a sleeping pill to calm her anxiety. If true, that means she never saw it coming. Her last moments, quiet, unaware, peaceful, were stolen by other people's impatience. But the tragedy didn't end with the crash. It was only the beginning of a long, uncomfortable silence. The music industry, the same machine that had shaped her image and profited from her mystery, quickly moved on. Albums re-released, tributes aired, but no one wanted to talk about accountability, about the pilot, the plane, the decisions that cost her life. It was easier to turn Aaliyah into an angel than to admit how the system failed her. And maybe that's the most painful truth, that Aaliyah spent her life controlled by others. From the secret marriage at 15 to the relentless schedules, her career had always been dictated by those in power. She was grace under pressure, perfection by demand. And even at the end, that control killed her. But what makes Aaliyah's story so haunting isn't just how she died. It's how alive she still feels. Her voice, breathy, intimate, eternal, still fills rooms like a ghost you want to believe in. Her influence runs through every R&B artist who came after her. Her style, minimalist, mysterious, effortless, still shapes the culture 2 decades later. She never got to see the world she built, but the world never stopped feeling her presence. Aaliyah was more than an icon. She was proof that softness could be power, that silence could be strength, that you don't have to scream to leave an echo. And maybe that's why, even after all these years, the tragedy still hurts. Because deep down, we know she was meant for forever. From this channel's perspective, Aaliyah was more than a singer. She was the embodiment of control in a world built to consume her. Her story isn't just a tragedy about a plane crash. It's about the quiet cruelty of perfection, how the music industry polishes innocence, sells it, and then discards it the moment it no longer serves the myth. Aaliyah's genius was subtle. She never needed to shout, expose, or scandalize. Her power came from restraint, from her ability to command a room with a whisper, to make R&B sound like the future without ever losing its soul. She didn't chase fame, fame chased her, and that's why the world loved her. But that's also why the world destroyed her. Aaliyah was the rare kind of artist who carried grace like armor. Every gesture, every word, every look, deliberate but never forced. She represented something the industry wasn't ready for, a woman in complete command of her image. Yet behind that image was a lifetime of others trying to define it, for her producers, executives, and mentors who saw potential before they saw personhood. Her story exposes one of fame's oldest illusions, that control equals freedom. In truth, Aaliyah was never free. From the whispers around her teenage years with R. Kelly, to the pressure of constant perfection, to the fatal final flight, every chapter of her life was touched by someone else's decision. And yet, through all of it, she never lost her gentleness. She was strength without hardness, confidence without arrogance, beauty without vanity. She was the kind of artist that time bends around, the kind that never really leaves. In a world obsessed with chaos, she chose calm. In an industry built on noise, she mastered silence. That was her rebellion, her quiet defiance. Even her death feels symbolic now. A plane, overloaded and unfit to fly, carrying too many expectations, too much weight pushed past its limits until it broke. Just like her career, just like her life. We often say stars burn out. But Aaliyah didn't burn out. She was taken stolen at the height of her light, leaving the rest of us staring at the sky, still searching for the glow she left behind. Her voice, her style, her mystery, they didn't die with her. They became the blueprint. Every modern artist who moves with quiet confidence owes something to Aaliyah. She wasn't the princess of R&B. She was its evolution. And maybe that's why her story feels so unfinished, because legends like her don't end. They just fade into airwaves, forever looping, forever beautiful, forever gone too soon. There's a moment at the end of Rock the Boat, her last music video, that feels almost prophetic. Aaliyah stands in a white outfit, her hair caught in the wind, surrounded by an endless sea. She looks calm, timeless, and for a second it feels less like a performance and more like a farewell. 2 weeks later, that same ocean would claim her. Even now, more than 2 decades later, her voice still feels like air, soft, weightless, eternal. You don't just hear Aaliyah. You feel her in every minimalist beat, in every artist who tries to capture that same effortless magic, in every whisper that carries a melody strong enough to move the world. They called her one in a million. They were wrong. She was once in a lifetime. Aaliyah wasn't loud. She didn't need to be. She understood something rare, that mystery was power, that elegance could be rebellion. She made music that sounded like the future and lived like she didn't belong to this world. Maybe that's because she didn't. Her story will always feel unfinished, not because of how she died, but because of how alive she still is. Every generation rediscovers her, like a signal transmitted through time. Graceful, pure, unbothered by the noise. She sang of angels, and in the end, she became one. Some stars fade. She ascended. Some stories were never meant to be known. But now, you know,